So our presentation is Career and Tech Center and School District Partnership. How did we make it a success? So first thing we did was we decided, what do we need to know about these kids? We need to know their interest, their ability, and aptitude. And that's what equals a successful student. And we all know that that always doesn't work well for us. We always know that they have the interest, they don't always have the ability or the aptitude. So this is what we did. We did a transition and vocational assessment, a transition planning and programming, the academic preparation, the SDIs, as you know, very important, and the appropriate level of support.
The other thing that I think is important for us in the CTE field to actually instruct the special ed staff at your corresponding sending schools is that we actually follow a different set of legal laws more than just IDEA. And that is something that I think that they're not aware of. So I really did try to make sure that all of our schools knew that even though they were following IDEA with IEPs, that we had this other level of legal system that we had to go through, which was Chapter 339. So I think that you need to make sure that you're letting those individuals at your sending schools know what rules you have to follow so that when you're audited, everything goes the way it's supposed to. So that was something that we took upon ourselves to do so that the home schools were aware of why we were asking for certain things or making sure certain things were being done at certain times was because we had an audit of our own to fulfill.
Correct. And one thing that I'm going to jump on this, one thing that I learned is that when we made accommodations for that student, we said that we're going to have a reader, we're going to let that student have a certain amount of time. One of the biggest things we do for certain students is instead of doing 4 choices, we might go down to 3 choices. We might have somebody who writes or scribes for the child or whatever. So what I've learned is with these chapters and with your tests, that doesn't always work. So if we know that we have a student who really could make it in a field, I really go back to you and I say to you, okay, what accommodations can we make here? What rules do we need to follow? And we try to make sure the student is aware that the accommodations they might get at their home school is not necessarily going to work at the CTCs. Okay, that's huge. That is huge. And what I normally would say is, okay, you don't get choices of 3 when you're working on an air conditioner. You know, you can't screw that up. You've got to understand that. And one of the hardest people to understand is the parent. But we have to really try to make that effort to do so.
And again, this is just 339. I think it's important that the sending school knows all the requirements that we have to follow.
Right. So now we're going to look at the enrollment procedures that we sort of put together that work for us. So usually in the springtime, Ruth would come over and she would say, who wants to have a tour of Still Center? And we usually have done that in 8th or 9th grade, really more like 9th grade, even though there's some 8th graders that have come over because they really had an interest in it. We don't send kids until 10th grade. And I know some of you might only send them in their senior year, some only for 2 years, but it's usually in 10th grade. And part of that reason is because of the PSSAs and everything that we have to go by at our school district. So we do try to conduct an assessment. You use the keys to work. We use something. That was what it was. Career cruising. And Ruth was the one that told me about it. I brought it over to our school district, so we have career cruising. We consider the aptitude, the interest, the academic skills. And what I always say to the parents and to the kid, you know what, you might want to be a nurse, okay? And a lot of our girls go into that health field, and they want to be a nurse. And they're struggling in their sciences, big time struggling in their science. And what I say to them, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because you have a disability. I wanted to be a rocket scientist, and well, you know, you see what happened to me here. And it just doesn't always happen for you. So yes, you might have the interest, but you have to have the ability. So if you can't necessarily be a nurse, look at starting out as a CNA and then work your way up. There's nothing wrong with that. So we consider the aptitude, the interest, the academic skills. And again, we say to the student, if you're not doing well in science here, you're not going to be doing well in science there because they're teaching the same thing to you. We guide them to an appropriate, and that's what I'm saying, we guide them to appropriate choice. A year before attending, we talked about the tour, we scheduled a visit. I would always go over with them. Ruth would facilitate, you go here, you go here. They had two choices. We would come back. She'd give me a little, you know, if there was some kid that was acting goofy, we talk about it. If she felt that that wasn't a good choice for him, I would talk to the kid about it because I was the one the kid knew. No. So then at one point, the students make a decision. They submit their application through the guidance counselor. We're looking for a parent's signature because a lot of times, yes ma'am?
I'm sorry, in the previous screen, you said that the students took an informal assessment?
Right.
During their tour?
Informal, it was, you know, somebody might say, like Ruth was walking around with them, and they might say, hey, do you know what this is? Do you have an understanding? Or do you know that if you work in HVAC, that you're going to have to climb through all the ceilings of a hotel or...
My teachers would do.
Yeah.
Some of the teachers were fairly specific about some things that they have students do when they come out to visit, especially in like cosmetology, health, electrical construction. They're really specific about, they give them some fine motor skill activities to do, or some height type things in protective services, just to make sure that their students are aware of all that's going to be expected. So some of the instructors are fairly specific when we have the students come over to visit, what they have them do. There's a reason for it, and then they make comments on that. And then I actually would take that to the IEP meetings.
And you know what, we're working with 9th graders. We're working with 9th graders or 10th graders. And so their idea of what actually takes place or what they think they want to do, let's even say, talk about cosmetology, that's a huge one. They're going to go over because they've been at home and they've been allowed to dye their hair and do their nails, but there are rules and regulations that they have to follow. So one of the things we like to do is, here's the book. Here's this book that you have to know. Here's the chemistry, the science, the biology behind that. What? I gotta learn? Yeah, you gotta learn that. You have to learn how to not burn somebody's scalp. You have to learn how not to peel somebody's face off. That's what you have to learn. They're like, what? What? Yeah, that's what you have to learn. So, and there was a student that we had talked about previously in another session who we really discouraged her going to cosmetology because she just wanted to play with hair. But we said, here's the book, here's how much the kit costs. And the parent said, no, she can go. Well, she was not successful. She dropped out within that first semester. So that's what we're talking about, the informal assessments. Yes, sir?
We do something at our school where we bring the kids over from the sending districts. We're mostly senior only. I mean, we do have some juniors, but during their 10th and 11th grade years, the kids will come and visit 2 shops, 2 programs. And we give the teachers a rating form. And when I bring them, we have a name, we call it a situational assessment. So the kids will come over and they might want to see HVAC and masonry. So the teachers will get one of those forms with the kid's name on it. They'll, you know, as the student's there, they'll fill it out, and then we'll send it back to the home school with their transition person, and then they can go over with the kid. And then we put that information in their IEP as well. You know, they visited, and then and some of the teachers, some are really good. Like they'll have a set reading assignment with some questions answered. Hey, this is what you're going to see in auto tech. So they'll do that. They'll do some of the hands-on stuff. So then you have documentation.
It does help if the teachers are fairly specific
Yes.
and are fairly consistent.
Some are better than others.
Yes, so that you can actually use that information going in. It does help when you have something like that set up.
And I think that's really important because when we send the kids over, so many of our kids are not in the typical academic. They don't want to sit and read a book and understand. They're hands-on. And I applaud that. I think that's wonderful that they're hands-on. But they also have to be sitting and reading a book in a lot of those areas over there. And we had, I remember somebody telling me that you might not have to read as an educator, but you have to read as an auto mechanic with all those manuals that you have. So when we send kids over there, we say, you don't think you're reading over there? Guess again. Look at the manual. You have to know how to read. Yes, sir.
The example you just gave about the student in cosmetology
Yes.
that ended up not being successful, you had reservations from the start.
Yes.
The student was accepted.
We had no choice. We had no choice. The parent insisted.
Yeah.
I mean, we can only guide, and we could say, here's our concerns. She was probably one of the few that we sat down with the parent and said, the
We did
facilitator
together.
and I did it. We sat down and we said, we really have concerns. I mean, before she even entered, because I saw what she was doing at the home district. Her attendance was poor, and the series before I said that you need to watch the attendance, the ability, and the progress. Her attendance was poor, her ability was poor because of mostly her attendance, and her progress would have been impeded because of her attendance.
That's exactly where I am with, I'm new to this, 2 years in as a special populations
Mhm.
coordinator, and I'm experiencing that sort of thing and trying to determine if it's better to take a firm no beforehand. However, if there is a spot available and the student has gone through the application process,
Mhm.
I understand they deserve a chance at
Right.
that, and I want to give every student a chance.
Right, and I agree with you.
Yeah. But then it's also figuring out, we deal with 6 sending schools, and it's not all the same for them, and it's sometimes difficult. We're kind of the stepchild, and they sometimes make it difficult taking a student
Mhm.
back, even though they're headed for failure overall.
Well, that's the other thing that I say. I say, okay, you send her, here's what's going to happen. Here's the credits. That counts as, depending on your school district, 2 to 4 credits. So in our school district, and those are called electives. So those credits you need to graduate. So if you fail, how are you going to make up those credits? See, before, years ago, okay, fine. Today, we're counting credits. You don't have a choice. So if you go over there, and this is something I would put in writing, and we did put it in writing. So we had this in her IEP, not in the IEP, but in her IEP folder. And we wrote this all out saying, here was our concerns. We sat down with the parent, we told her the concerns, we said, here it is. We said, and if she fails, then we're going to be scrambling to catch up on those credits.
And obviously, on our end of things, we're trying to provide the appropriate support
Exactly.
to make the student successful. There's only so much time in the day and so many resources to
Right.
use, and using what's in the IEP as well. You already had an idea that it wasn't going to work. We gave it a try. And that meeting ahead of time, is that ever something that you talk about in that IEP before the student starts? Say,
Oh.
look, this is a risk.
I'll even at the IEP say, we're going to meet in 1 month. We're setting the meeting date now. We're going to meet in 1 month because we believe that there are going to be issues, especially if it's attendance. I mean, really, what accommodation can you make if it's attendance? I'll actually ask the guidance counselor in that meeting, when is the last day that we can send this student back, that you can enroll them and get them in classes because they're not going to pass this, and you're going to have to take them back. And I'll make sure that we're having a meeting the beginning of that week, so that we can review what's going on. And if at that point in time, somebody has to make a decision, I'm not making it, this team's making it. Are you going to let them stay and possibly fail, or are you going to pull them back and make sure that they're going to get the credits? I try and get everybody yanked in on that, so it doesn't look like it's me being the bad guy.
Right.
I mean, I will. I'll say to the guidance counselor, when's the last day you can get them in classes? Okay, so we're going to meet before that.
And again, there's still, it's sad to say, once the kid's out of the building, you really don't really think much about that kid. Guidance counselors, you know, us, but today, she's exactly right. We have to be aware of what's happening over at a CTC, because if those credits come down the line, and we've got a parent who's savvy in special ed, you know, knows the laws, I don't want to be sitting in a due process. So my suggestion is make sure you CYA yourself.
Yes.
Okay? You write it down. You have the meeting. You tell them. You say, let's meet in a month. Let's see how she's progressing. And so, and again, I agree with you. You really don't have a good feeling about this. I don't know if this person doesn't have the aptitude. I just knew that she wanted to go over there and play with there. I knew that she was not focused enough to do that. So her parent gave her the chance and wasted over $200. And we were able to pull her back. We did it probably within the first semester. So
Right,
she
first
only
month.
lost a semester of credit anyways.
I'm sure it was probably the first month even.
Yeah, possibly.
Thank you.
But I think that's why, you know, on this slide, it says, you know, schedule an IEP meeting and include the CTC rep. That's why that first revision meeting to actually place the student in your facility, in that IEP. I think that's why that's so important, because you can kind of set those parameters then. And I think that's the hardest thing from the CTC point of view. That's typically our hardest part to get in. Once the student's in our building, then the light bulb goes off. Oh yeah, I guess they have to be there. It's making sure, setting it up in the beginning. You know, I don't know when your applications come over. I don't know what your applications look like, but there for a period of time, those applications weren't permitted supposedly to say whether the student had an IEP or not. Well, now our applications can have that it's an IEP student on the application, the little box checked. Well, for 5 or 6 years, we were told that that was illegal, so that wasn't on there. So it made this process of making sure you're getting in on the ground floor extremely difficult. You know, we were dependent on, well, Karen would answer and give you all the information, but you're dependent on other people that don't know you and probably don't care.
They don't get it,
you know.
right. The other thing too, just been started, the other thing that I want to, before I forget, okay, the other thing that I want to jump on this is that when you have the meeting and she brings over the curriculum or she brings over the guides, whatever she brings over, and she hands it to the parent might have gone to a CTC and they think they know, because, you know, we all go to school, so we all know what's happening in school. Well, you know what, I don't see any nuns in my school anymore, you know? They're not there, and nobody's hitting me or anything like this. It has changed, for gosh sakes, it changed. We continue to move forward, hopefully, and the school education you got in 1970-something or 80-something is not what you're receiving in 2016. You're not receiving that. So Ruth now can come over and say, here's the curriculum. Here it is. And in 1970, when somebody was working in auto body, I don't know if there was a curriculum or a manual.
Well, it changed so frequently. At least with the program of study, it does make it so that you can go to the website, you can pull that off, you can take that curriculum with you,
Right.
and I do.
Right. So you can see, so we want to say to the parent, do you understand this is what we're expecting your child to do? And a lot of times they're like, whoa, you know, whoa, I didn't know that. Yes, sir.
We have 16 sending school districts, so we set up every year visitation for faculty members from the outside schools to
Oh,
come in.
nice.
And they're there all day long. We actually take them through all our labs. They can choose, so you can see some of their students. Teachers sit down from the top of the curriculum in the classrooms. They also have them participate in stuff that we do in the lab as well. It's been very beneficial in our aspect because we're educating our faculty and they're sending better kids. So that's been something that's been very positive for us. And we, between both of our campuses, we flow back and forth from east to west each year. So we have that one, and that's been phenomenal. It's been very educational.
And so the faculty that you're sending over there, they're special educators?
Yes.
Okay, the case managers?
And it's typically all new teachers. So when the new ones come in, they're constantly coming over, and it's been a great process for us.
What do you think of that?
Well,
I like it.
well, you know what we do is, when the students come over with a large group, typically what happens is a different teacher comes every
That's
year.
what we do too.
Yeah,
But
so
this
that,
is nice because you actually get to sit down and talk to the instructor. We all do
Yeah.
demonstrations, and we have teachers come in and they'll talk about the program in detail with them. And they get a lot of our answered quickly then. And it's been more realistic for them to see exactly what it is, because every time they come to us, they're like, this is not what I expected. You guys are, this is not the protectable.
Right,
This is
exactly,
so much
exactly,
different,
right,
so.
right.
and they have so much influence on the students as far as what they're going to
Correct.
choose, that the more information they have, the better of an assistant they can be to that student.
Our relationships have been a lot stronger with their home schools because of that. We're constant communication with them, and they're always asking us questions, but most of them are answered because they actually got to see the facility.
I like that idea. Do you remember Cameron C? Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cameron's father attended actually attended Still Center, that specific one. I don't know what his father went into, but he said, you know, this is just a bunch of crap, and he didn't use the word crap, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, we got a stupid head son who goes blah, 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 too. So he decides to send his son over for computers there, and he was very good. Cameron's very good at computers. The father, who's now in computers, and would love to tell all of us, because he went to West Jeff, that he didn't go to college, but he's living in one of the biggest houses in Jefferson. That's the kind of guy he is. So he would tell the computer teacher what to teach his son. Didn't want him to follow the curriculum. That's what he wanted to teach his son. So we really had a difficult time with that guy, because he says, oh, I can run all over, I can do all this kind of stuff. Have at it, buddy. So when Cameron came in with whatever he was whatever he was supposed to do, it wasn't done. That's our Cameron. It wasn't done. He got a C or a B, and the father went over that. We said, go talk to Still Center, and he did. And he saw the curriculum that Cam had to follow, and he backed off. So, and that's what I'm saying. He still had that old idea.
So I think we're just reinforcing here, and several of you are doing that. Often it's our responsibility, and we have to take charge of making that contact with the homeschool. And I don't think we can emphasize that enough. It is very difficult. It's very unnerving when people continually don't respond to you. And I consider that very rude from peer to peer, but they're going to be like that. I guess all I can say is persistence hopefully will pay off, so that you can get yourself in the swing of things with the sending school special ed staff. And because this is all the information that we have to provide, I know you are aware of what we have to provide. And because we're going to go through the different areas as well.
Okay, so we know it's held at the home district. We know that we try to discuss the informal assessment, what she found there, what the teachers found, what we see over here. An informal assessment could be he doesn't do well in math, and if this happens to be a math-based area, we need to talk about that. A given example is a student doesn't do well in math here at the home school, but he wants to be a carpenter. So, you know, in our minds, all he has to do is measure. That's all he has to do. That's what the parent thinks also. But then when you see the curriculum, or you see the union test, that this is what that student has to have, then you say, oh, geez, okay, well, we need to ramp that up. We need to get those math skills up. We review the appropriateness of the placement. I'm a big fan. I'm not sending kids over to you guys just as the dumping ground. That was never my idea. And I know that's what happens to you. But we also send them over, and you might not agree with this, but it's maybe that we send a student over to get a baseline skill. And we talked about that in a previous presentation, where I did send a student in baking. She was never going to be a baker, but she learned some basic skills that she's now at a Giant Eagle. She knows how to do some of those basic things. Going out of her bubble, of the TJ bubble, she went over to Still Center to people she never knew, and she gained confidence with this. She gained confidence being in a big, large kitchen, enough that she's now employed, and that's the bottom line. That was a great thing for her. We also talk about this particular IEP is written to reflect the vocational placement. So we shouldn't have things in there that that they're going to college at this particular time. We should focus on the vocational placement.
And it's important for us to make sure, of course, that you have a copy of the IEP, and according to 339, make sure you have that signature page.
So, if you can see it's in bold, we said Sam is currently a sophomore attending the best high school in the best school district. Since first grade, he was diagnosed with the ADHD, with learning disability and reading. He is considering attending the CTC for heating and air. So that's all we put in. This is our first year here. He plans to work full-time in the future, is not sure about the need for post-secondary education. One thing that I did find out is that we don't have to put in that he is going to be successful, that he is going to be competitively employed. We know that's the goal, but we don't have to put that in. Yes?
Quick question back to the one, when you said about the banker and going, and she got the basic skills.
Yeah.
Did she do the whole POS and take the NOCTI also?
No, because this was somebody that we sent over in her, I don't know if she took the NOCTI, she might have taken that. I have to think about that. We sent her in her senior year. And this was a student that, you know, we try to put all our kids in those round holes, and she was not a round hole person, she was a square. So we tried to really think outside of our box, what would she like to do? And she said she thinks she would like to explore baking. Well, she's already did the home ec thing. Home ec is not baking. So we did send her. She struggled, there was no doubt about it, she struggled. Did she take the NOCTI?
No, she wouldn't have, because she went through
No,
OVR.
well, I didn't know what year she went.
Yeah.
Right,
Did
then
she,
she went through OVR after
so that first year, did she go through the whole POS?
No, she did not. She wasn't a completer. She went on to, didn't she go on to Project?
She went on to Project Search. Are you familiar with Project Search? Project Search is run by Goodwill. You actually have to apply. The student applies just like an application like college. You apply, and if you're accepted, the one in Pittsburgh is housed at Mercy Hospital. And what Project Search does is gives you an opportunity to look at 3 different areas where they feel that you would be successful. And they actually work in those areas in the hospital, and that's what she did. And one of her areas was in the food service area. Right. So then what's even nicer is that when she left, I believe they had a transition person or job placement coach and went out and placed her out somewhere. And I think that's where how she got the job at Giant Eagle.
Working in the bakery.
Working in the
So
bakery.
it was one of those things where it was OVR going to continue her, but then she ended up with Project Search, which was a better deal, and so she wasn't a completer with us. That doesn't happen too often, though. Typically they do complete. We frequently have students that'll do a 13th or a 14th year. Our districts are typically very agreeable to that, and we actually lay that out in one of the meetings in the beginning, that you realize that this is a 2 to 3 year program. Is the district willing to take this on? And I bring it up in their first year if it's going to go over, so that there's no question with the parent, there's no question with the district. I get that out in the very beginning, so that then everybody's aware that this student should be there for 2 to 3 years, so that discussion is on the table from the very beginning.
In my world, we know that kids have the right to education until they're 21. And in my world, it's discouraged. It absolutely is discouraged. However, I haven't been fired yet, and I'm now retired, so I'm pretty good. I don't think I'm going to get fired. And we did mention, you have the right to education until you're 21. And if that means that you go to the CTC for another year, you know, which they would go the entire day, then you go, if that's what it takes to complete. Because there are a lot of kids, again, you're asking kids to make a decision in 9th and 10th grade. That's so young. That's so, so young. So when when they do make that decision at the end of the 10th grade, and they're now thinking, yeah, I want to go over to a CTC, and you're a junior, but you're not going to complete. So that's when that discussion needs to happen. Go ahead. All right, so now we talked about, at the previous slide, was what we put in about the CTC. Can you go back there for just a second, please?
I don't know if I can.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I
then,
can't.
you can't?
I can't, I didn't.
Oh, okay. So we said that Sam is currently here. He is considering attending the CTC. We talked about that. But also, down here, we say he struggles with reading materials at grade level. That's something that I put in that you guys don't put in. But if I have a concern about Sam over at this HVAC, I need to make sure I have that in there. We talked about him using AT, that's assistive technology. Okay, we put that in too, because if we're using the assistive technology here, we might have to use it over there. And it says if he decides to go to CTC, he needs to use the assistive technology. I just want to point that out. Okay. Then we have the present levels related to the transition goals. We said that he completed an interest inventory and then showed that he wanted to do the HVAC. He wanted to do that. Well, the results indicating an interest in architecture and construction. That's wrong, say up there. We changed that one on myself. And then following trustee of knowledge about the duties of heating, air conditioning. Okay. Now, here's one thing I want to talk about here. So we have the career cruising, okay, or we have the keys to work, we have whatever. This indicates that he has an interest in architecture and construction. That's fine. I had a kid who had like a muscular dystrophy. He was in a wheelchair. He was extremely bright. He took career cruising. They said that he wanted to be an airline pilot or a cowboy because he knew how to manipulate the career cruising. Okay, he was never going to do any of that stuff. But he said, "Look, I want to be a cowboy or something that he could walk or whatever." Okay, fine. So when we do the interest inventory, we have to take that with a grain of salt because they're smart enough to manipulate that. So, but when he was interviewed, he expressed he wasn't knowledgeable about the duties of heating and air conditioning. That's when we step in. She shows him what is on here, okay, so that he has a working knowledge of it. Okay, we also put in here that the parent was a paramedic and he felt that that was a better choice for his son. But we're not going to go with the dad. We're going to say this is what the kid wants at this particular time. Okay.
And this is just, again, we're just running through parts of the IEP where our CTC information should be included. Please make sure that you provide the zip code. All of you know that that's specific to each of your buildings, because what in my building, what's called HVAC might not be the same zip code as what your building is. So just make sure that they're aware that something goes in there, because homeschools frequently aren't aware that that section needs to be populated. So please make sure you're providing that information to them.
Okay. So now we have the post-secondary goals. So we have to list the appropriate courses, and that includes the CTC. You know, and here's what the service and the activity that we did for the year. Tour to visit the CTC. We said one time. Obviously, it can be more than that. Determine the post-secondary options in the career. And this can change. If he goes over there and says, you know what, I really don't like this HVAC. I really didn't think this was good. Okay, we try to get that done within that first month so that he either comes back to school or we see if there's another spot for him over at the CTC. It's really important that he just doesn't say, okay, well, I want to go to auto body. You know, we really want to say, okay, well, you chose this, now you want something different. So we don't like the kids to jump all over the place. And of course, then for us, to increase his organizational skills. Course of study again, our goal is always competitive employment. He now works towards the level 1 competencies, and he begins to build a resume. We just throw that in because we have to throw something in. You know, I mean, he's only 9th or 10th grade. You really building a resume at the time. Okay. Now, this is the part that I find very interesting, because this kid, we said small group instruction well, that's still center. At the CTC, we take tests when requested. He's got to ask that, and extra time for projects. Now, this is all allowed at the CTC, okay? If this was me doing this, there would be, because he's ADHD and he has learning disability and reading. So he would have somebody reading the test to him. He would have maybe a choice of 3 because of the ADHD. There would be a lot more on there. And it would say West Jefferson Hills School District. It would not say Still Center. Because what we're trying to do is to say, okay guys, you can do it here because it's academic and that's what you need. But if you're over here and you're eventually going to have to take a test, that isn't going to be allowed. So we try to keep it within the parameters of what CTC does and what we do.
And we try to do that. Sometimes we're not successful, but we try not to take all of those accommodations and use them all. And the reason that we say retake tests, and all of you have different ideas of why you do whatever. The reason that we typically say retake tests is because in industry, if you don't pass that EMT test, you pay to take it again. And that's typically why we give the student the opportunity to retest as opposed to adapting that test. So again, if you have a student coming in though that has had those accommodations year after year after year, you might use them for a year and then the next year withdraw them. It's just important for us to try and get them into reality as quickly as possible.
Right. The other thing too is, as our kids grow older, you know, they're freshmen, they come in, they're all like scared and whatever. But if they're even planning on going to college or they're continuing their education wherever, even over at the CTC, we say to them, or I know I've said to them, hey, if you can take a test without the accommodations, or at least, you know, start knocking those off, that's great, because you're not going to be able to do it at the CTC, and you're not going to be able to do it at college. We know what college accommodations are. So if that's what you're planning, so it's not a huge surprise, begin to knock those off. Does everybody use IEP writer?
Well, we might,
Yeah.
I think most districts do, but I don't know what all your districts use.
Right. No.
In 16, there's 3 different
Yeah.
programs.
Okay.
That's the biggest problem we have.
Right.
Well, if you use, I don't think it matters what program you use. We use IEP writer, and you know, IEP writer, I'm sure it's better. It was cumbersome at the very beginning, but I'm sure it gets better. Somebody in those districts, you can call them up and say, hey, add Still Center to West Jefferson Hills School District. So you don't have to hand write it in. They can populate that right in there. Okay?
But if not,
You
if
get
it's
it.
handwritten in, that's certainly acceptable.
Right,
But that does have to be listed.
right.
We were just trying to show here all the different areas in the IEP where our information should occur.
Okay, so now it's complete. Let's look ahead at year 2 and 3.
We all know that there's an annual career objective form that has to be completed at the Career and Tech Center, and that, of course, has to be done annually. And therefore, some of the items that are within that IEP, we do need to discuss at the IEP meeting, so you're making sure that the student is fulfilling that career objective form appropriately.
I want to stop here for a second too. And I think it's really important that you have that conversation with your CTC rep, the learning facilitator, whoever comes over to the school district. Because what their goal obviously is for that student to complete all the different levels, go off and do whatever they're going to do. That might not necessarily be the goal that we have in mind for that student. Okay, so if we go back to the girl who was the baker, and that's when she decided to go there in her senior year. She was never going to be a baker, but we got her into an area where she felt comfortable enough that she can now go into a bakery at Giant Eagle and do some of those work there. and that's because we were able to send that over. She completed, maybe she completed the first one, I don't remember.
And again, these are just the sections to make sure that you're getting that information into the IEP. It's important to make sure that, especially when you go, when you're audited as well, depending on the auditor, they do look to make sure that the CTC information is in all these different fields.
And now we're in the second and third year, and now we're looking at the attendance, we're looking at the task grades and the test grades. When we look at the attendance, and this is something, again, if an auditor came in and the kid is still at the CTC, let's say they look and they say, she's missed 50 days, okay, and it's important that she keep that attendance up. Okay, so what did you do to increase the attendance? All you're doing is telling me that she's missed 50 days. That's a lot. So what are you doing to increase the attendance or addressing that concern or sending her back to the home district? We also talked about task grades and test grades. That's another thing that I learned. You know, I have children, I never wanted my kids to get a D. But if I had a student and that's the best that kid could do was a D at the home school, I'm fine with that, okay? Don't want you to have a D, but you're passing. What we now know is that at a CTC, D is not passing. I don't want anybody cutting my hair who got a D at clipping. I'm not going there, okay? Right? Okay, or working on my car. So that's something, again, if we put that in and said that this child got a D, that it's just maintaining a D in auto body, that's a problem. That's really a problem. We need to address that, okay?
And again, just making sure in the transition section that you are, you know, letting them know in the employment section what certification exam they're working towards. I know we aren't going back over this year 2 and year 3, but I would put in there that they're going to take the NOCD. I would put in there that they're preparing for the nurse's aide certification. You know, all that information, make sure is in that transition grid so that it's documented that it's being done.
All right.
Again, local assessments, please make sure that they keep in the accommodations. It's awkward to say in a senior's IEP, keep those accommodations in there somewhere. Some districts will leave them in the Keystone section, and other districts say no, that they can't keep them in the Keystone section, it has to be in the local section. Okay, it doesn't matter to me where they are. Just make sure that those accommodations are kept there so that when it's NOCD time in their senior year, I actually go back to that IEP, because if the student requests extra time and they've regularly used extra time for an assessment, I'm going to order the extended NOCD through your guidance counselor, okay? Or a reader, you know, they give you a code and the student can listen to the test being read. So that's why we want to make sure that those accommodations are left in whatever was used for the Keystones, somewhere in there. You can't get into a huge argument. I did a couple times and it really wasn't worth it. Wherever they want to stick that in there, as long as it's there somewhere and legally you can show that you tried to fulfill those accommodations that were used for the Keystones. The other thing that I think that we need to make sure, especially in that last IEP, is anything specific that is needed for employment. Do they have a driver's license? Are they working towards it? If they're in construction, hopefully they are. Or if they're in the automotive field in some manner, you know, them having a license is going to be important. You know, just making sure that you're thinking of all the items that student's going to need, because I can tell you that, you know, she's not, because she's thinking of a different track than we are. And just making sure that the family's aware of SOAR and those credits that might be available, because I can tell you that most of our families are not aware of that. They're not aware that if they go into HVAC, they can probably get 9 credits at the local community college when they're done. The parents aren't aware of that. The student might not even be aware of it, even though I know the student has been told over and over again. It's just making sure that we're giving the family all the information. And I can tell you right now, if your OVR counselors change the way our OVR counselors change, the OVR people aren't even aware of what we can offer that student. So you really are informing not just the parent typically and the sending school, but with us, we're always informing the OVR rep, because typically our OVR reps change all the time. Do yours as well? Every year there's a new face sitting at that table, if they even get to that table. The other thing that we will do is we'll do a compilation, a short synopsis, and we'll actually forward it to the OVR rep if for some reason that OVR person didn't show that day, which also happens for that last IEP. That way, all that information that you sent in an email to Karen to put in that IEP, I'll forward it to the OVR rep as well. If they're involved in the IEP, just because they didn't attend, they're going to be getting that information anyway, and I let the parent know. I'll just send that over to them too, so that they have an idea of what that student covered. I think that I'll also print out, everybody uses a different system in your homeschool as well. I'll also print out all the competencies that student covered, and I'll give them to that, to the family in that last IEP. Now, if it isn't at the end of the year, I tell them there will be more to add to that, but I give them that list, because then that way the student's not trying to remember what they covered and what they completed during the time with you. It's just helpful for that OVR rep to know what that student has done. I think that's it.
Do you have
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about SDIs. One major concern I have is when a student who has emotional support services at the homeschool is coming to the CTC and has things noted in there, like that they're on a level system, and they might, if they are at a lower level for whatever reason, they have someone who escorts them in homeschools to their classes, monitors them, like a classroom aide would, and if they're not being successful, we'll return them to the emotional support room. We don't have that availability, so I make that clear, and it's noted elsewhere, but it's just a...
That might be, that's not really a call for you. That's really a school district call. And you know, Josh, you know what I'm talking about?
Well, we
Yeah.
get that all the time.
Yeah. We sent, one of the few kids we sent over was Josh, and I forget, what was Josh in?
EC.
Okay.
Yeah, but your district was unusual. They were willing to send an aide for him, and then we faded that aide out.
We did.
But
We did.
I have to tell you, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody here, most districts are like, it's your problem now, you figure out what you're going to do with it. Your district was very unusual. In fact, I asked for that aide to start the second year, just to be sure that Josh, over the summer, hadn't picked up some old tendencies. And believe it or not, they provided that aide for 1 month, just to make sure that Josh was successful. And I have to tell you, Josh ended up being very successful. But the one thing that may have helped is when she had the IEP, I requested for his regular ed teachers to be in the IEP. And I asked how often they had to redirect Josh during a 45-minute class time. And then I said, okay, so we're going to multiply that by 3. And that's how many times my teacher's going to have to redirect. How is his team going to address that? And the only way I was able to do that is she fulfilled my request though. She had all his regular ed teachers at that meeting. So that's a thought, if you can try and push it in that
I almost
mode.
think it would be beneficial to talk prior to the IEP with someone from the district.
With her, yeah.
Supervisor, whoever, to say, look, I'm seeing concerns. When we get into the IEP, we're going to need to talk about if an aide is going to be coming over with the student.
Well, here's the thing, you could go in the back door with this. You know, we try not to be confrontational, and, you know, we always find these people that are confrontational. If he has, for half a day, he is having difficulty, so he needs an aide for, actually the full day, okay, at the home school. But now, he's going to go over to a CTC. The difference is that aide should follow him to the CTC. It should.
But the
And that's-
districts all,
Right.
the districts.
But that's what I'm
handle that
saying,
different.
if they're, again, depending on how that special educator, the case manager presents it, and it makes sense. And that's how I would have said it. I would have said, okay, so he's got the aide here, so why don't we just send that aide over with him for half a day? What's the difference? You're still paying the aide.
The aides that I'm talking about, the ES classroom has 2 aides.
Mhm.
And it's not 2 aides for 2 students, it's 2 aides for the whole classroom.
So that aide, when this student acts out, this aide is contacted to pull the kid out of the,
Right.
okay, okay,
That's a totally
That's a
totally
different-
different
right.
scenario.
yes.
I-
It's not a one-on-one.
I would try and see if maybe in the meeting you could get some sort of actual data in
Like you
front
were
of the
talking about.
participants.
Mhm.
How many times has a student been pulled from a regular ed
Mhm.
class in the past 9-week period? Or you can maybe request that, knowing that the student might be coming over to you, say, I would like data collected for 1 month. How many times has that student had to be pulled and been in with you? Because we're going to have to discuss this at the meeting, and it's better that you have that data coming in. I don't know, does anybody else have any other
And the other
idea?
thing is, it's a safety factor.
Yes.
It's huge, that's huge. So, I mean, always throw the safety factor in there. So then you've got yourself a lawsuit. And that's one thing that we always try to avoid, is the due process and the lawsuit. We never know where the parents are coming from, and if they think they smell money, they'll go after it.
So you might want to have that discussion, a serious discussion up front with that
Mhm.
special ed person. You know, especially again, if they haven't been out and they're not aware of what's all available to that student. We had one time going in, we have the only meat cutting program left in the state of Pennsylvania, and we had a student going in there, and it was scary. We had an aide because there were knives available, and we couldn't dissuade the family, but luckily the district was willing to support the safety factor. And of course, the student didn't last, so the district didn't have to pay the aide for very long, but
Yeah,
we brought
that's the
that
other thing.
safety factor up. So you might want to request data if you can't have the regular ed teacher in the meeting to seriously discuss this issue that might occur.
Is this student, does the student want to attend CTC? Has a real, true interest?
Yes.
And see, sometimes we see a different animal at the homeschool because they are so engaged in whatever they're doing at your place. And then they come over and they sleep through history and math and social, okay, you get the point. But you might not even see that behavior because that child really wants to be there and will be on his best behavior knowing that he could be removed at any time. So, I mean, that's also a plus.
Yeah, you could put some type of a caveat in there behaviorally, that if the student does X, Y, and Z, that automatically he goes back to you, your district, You know, are you willing to pull him? I definitely I wouldn't let them gloss over it though. I would be the mean person at that meeting and keep coming back to it. Don't let it be glossed over when you meet.
I hope to see that he finds success with, something that he's interested
Sure.
in, a lot of hands-on stuff that
Right.
he is.
But we need to provide safety for him.
Looking at prior history, it doesn't look good, so.
Yeah,
Right.
how can we provide the safe environment for him?
Right. Right.
Any other questions? I appreciate your input too, because again, everybody does this differently. And we just like to make sure that everybody has ideas to see what will work for you.
Thank you very much.